They thought discarding you would cost them nothing, that you'd vanish quietly, lick your wounds, and come running the moment they snapped their fingers. But what if I told you, your silence is the punishment they never saw coming? Most people think disappearing is weakness, but in Stoicism, silence is sharp. It's not retreat, it's evolution. And when done right, it doesn't just make them regret losing you, it makes them question their entire illusion of control. You're about to understand why your absence, when done with clarity and calm, becomes the loudest consequence of all. The ones who discarded you without blinking are the same ones who will quietly fall apart when they realize you're no longer emotionally available. And if you're tired of being the one who always waits, explains, or begs to be understood, then you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to the channel, because here every week we turn pain into power, silence into strategy, and heartbreak into your most unshakable version. If they discarded you like it meant nothing, stay right here, because what you're about to hear will change how they remember you forever. Painful breakups rarely come with explanations. Sometimes everything ends in brutal silence, no fights, no drama, no final scene. They just vanish. And the cruelest part? You are still there, trying to make sense of it all, while they already live like you never existed. Then comes the most recycled advice. Go no contact. Cut everything off. Disappear. Block. Stay silent. Maybe, just maybe, they'll feel your absence. Maybe the silence will scream loud enough. But time goes by and nothing happens. And that, right there, is a new kind of pain. Because when you vanish hoping they'll miss you, and they don't, your silence becomes an echo inside you. A void with no answers. A space that doesn't heal. You disappear and they feel nothing. You distance yourself and they continue like it's business as usual. Nothing shifts. What no one told you is that disappearing doesn't hit like it used to. The world is flooded with people who vanish, block, ghost, and then come back. It has become a pattern, a routine. And what's predictable doesn't hurt, doesn't shake, doesn't mean anything anymore. If silence was once a powerful emotional weapon, it lost its edge. Because now everyone expects it, especially the ones who once discarded you. They already know your next move. They've seen the pattern before, they're emotionally prepared. They don't feel your absence anymore. That's why disappearing is no longer enough. Strategic detachment needs to go deeper than just cutting contact. It's not about vanishing from someone's life. It's about vanishing from their emotional narrative. It's not a physical absence, it's becoming emotionally unreachable. You know that feeling when you still follow someone online, but their energy has shifted? The way they post, the silence in their captions, the lack of reactions, the tone. Suddenly, someone who was once so available is now distant, quiet, unfazed. And that's what stings. This is where the first cracks form in the ego of the one who discarded you. Not because you disappeared, but because you stayed differently. You're not trying to show pain, loss, sadness. You're showing neutrality, a calm that doesn't block, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. That silence hits harder. Because you're still around, but you're not there for them. You exist, you move, you breathe, but none of it points in their direction anymore. You've become a reflection that doesn't respond, an echo that doesn't return. That shakes their pride. And here, your presence changes roles. It's no longer a gift, it becomes a reminder. A quiet reminder that you still exist, but you're not theirs anymore. Not emotionally, not energetically. That confusion is what triggers their discomfort, because this time there's no clear answer. When you vanish, people tell themselves stories. They're just hurt. But when you remain calm, silent, and emotionally inaccessible, there's nothing to hold on to. You haven't left, but you're already gone. You're right there, but unreachable. That contradiction eats away at them, and that's where the real impact begins, not when you disappear, but when you evolve, when you stop participating, when you shift in silence, not to punish, but to protect, when you no longer offer explanations, when you stop reacting and just keep moving peacefully. So if you thought silence would be enough, maybe you fell for the myth of surface-level detachment. The real transformation happens inside. It's not about leaving, it's about being unreachable. Even if they still have access to you, they can't touch what you've become. This kind of detachment leaves no visible wounds, but it breaks illusions. Because nothing confuses more than someone who stays physically present but emotionally absent. It forces them to face something they never expected. You're not trying anymore, and they can feel that. If this video is touching something in you, subscribe to the channel. Every week, new weapons of silence, strategic presence, and emotional rebuilding for those who are done begging for love from people who never truly valued them. There comes a moment when you realize that your silence no longer frightens them, that they've learned to survive without your presence. It's not shocking anymore, not disorienting. It's part of the expected pattern, a routine they've seen coming long before you ever took the first step back. Disappearing used to mean something. There was a time when your absence would leave echoes. Now it's background noise, because the person who once took you for granted has adapted. They've studied your rhythm. They know the silence comes eventually. They've built defenses for it. They even anticipate it. They'll stop talking soon, they think. They always do. Then they'll come back when it cools down. And that mindset makes your disappearance harmless, predictable, easy to ignore. You've been rehearsed in their mind so many times there's no shock left. When someone rehearses your absence like that, they don't fear losing you. They fear nothing. Because deep down, they never believed your silence meant something permanent. They learned to sit through your storms without getting wet. That's the power of emotional preparation. So when you pull away expecting to cause an earthquake, what you find is stillness. Cold, quiet stillness. Not because they don't care, but because they're no longer surprised. You've become part of their script, the dramatic pause before your next reappearance. And that's when it hits you. The silence doesn't work anymore, not like it used to. Because it's no longer a statement. It's a background hum, expected, managed, filed away under temporary absence. Your emotional retreat has lost its sting, and the more you repeat it, the safer they feel. It's a brutal realization that what once made them tremble now barely makes them blink, and not because they're stronger, but because you've become emotionally predictable. You gave them the blueprint, the map, and they learned how to walk through it without losing balance. That's the turning point. That's when your energy must shift, because silence alone isn't enough. Withdrawal without transformation becomes invisible. You stop being a mystery. You stop being missed, not because you're unworthy, Mars, but because you're doing the same dance. When you disappear just to be noticed, they sense it. When you go silent but still carry the hope of being chased, they feel it, and they don't move. Because they know that as long as you're waiting for them to notice, you're still emotionally there, still attached, still offering power. But something changes, and I mean truly changes, when you stop running away and start walking forward. When you stop making silence a tactic, and instead make it a reflection of your growth. You don't hide, you move, you don't punish, you evolve. That's where it stings. They expect your silence to mean, please notice me, but they never expect it to mean, I no longer care. And it's in that shift, from waiting to walking, that your absence finally becomes real. Not noisy, not angry, just solid, quiet, unreachable. That's the part they never prepared for, because they were ready for your tears. They were ready for your confusion. They were ready for your vanishing act followed by a soft return, but they weren't ready for your calm. They weren't ready for your peace, for the version of you that walks without looking back. That version of you, the one that doesn't flinch, doesn't explain, doesn't seek attention, that version is what breaks the illusion they built. That version is what flips the script. Because now, they're the ones left watching in silence, unsure how to bring you back. And ironically, it's not the volume of your silence that makes an impact. It's the clarity of your presence in your own life. It's the way you fill your days without needing their validation. It's the fact that your energy no longer chases, no longer retreats. It just stands firm. That energy, that stillness, that peace, that's the new language they don't speak. And it scares them. Not because you left, but because this time, you didn't leave with an open door, you didn't leave a trail of crumbs. You simply changed the direction of your steps. No more waiting, no more checking who watches your stories, no more holding your breath for closure that never comes. You are no longer playing hide and seek. You are building something real, and that is the part they can no longer control. Sometimes the most powerful move is not to disappear, but to stay, silently, steadily, without offering access. You don't leave, you don't block, you don't run. But you also don't respond, don't explain, and don't invite emotional interaction. And precisely that is what disarms them. People who play emotional games count on your reactions. They survive off your patterns, the replies, the explanations, the justifications. When you vanish, they wait. When you come back, they continue. But when you stay without playing, that's when everything starts to fall apart. Imagine someone trying to play chess against you, but you simply stop moving your pieces. You're still there, still at the table, but unmoved. No reaction, no counterplay, no drama, just presence. That kind of silence. It terrifies people who rely on control. Because when you remain emotionally calm, when you don't chase or provoke, the control they once had begins to slip. And they don't know how to handle that. Your stillness becomes the loudest message you could ever send. It says, I see you, but I am no longer yours to move. That shift is subtle but lethal. You're still visible, still in their world, but unreachable. You didn't vanish, you just stopped bleeding energy in their direction. And that quiet withdrawal of emotional fuel begins to choke their illusion of dominance. They expect emotional withdrawal to be dramatic. They prepare for blocked calls, angry messages, long monologues. But they never expect serenity. They never expect you to remain present and untouched. That's the piece they can't decode. You might still follow each other. You might even see them. But your energy no longer bends, no longer leaks. You speak when necessary. You act with grace. And when provoked, you offer silence, not resistance. This is not coldness, it's control. It's emotional clarity. That clarity is your shield. And to someone who used to manipulate, it's unbearable, because it shows that their tactics no longer penetrate. Their words don't land. Their gestures don't pull you back in. They throw bait, and you simply don't bite. It's like throwing stones into a calm lake and expecting waves, but watching nothing ripple. That silence, that calm, that refusal to be disturbed, it's a language they don't speak. And that is what begins to unravel their sense of power. This is where they begin to question everything. Why aren't they reacting? Why didn't they answer? Amos, why do they look fine? These questions torment them because they're not seeing pain, they're not seeing effort, they're seeing peace, and they can't touch it. And what breaks them isn't your absence, it's your neutrality. It's the fact that you didn't disappear, you just detached. And in doing so, you turn the game board upside down. You are there but unavailable, present but out of reach. Think of it like changing the lock without announcing it. They still have the key, but it doesn't open anything anymore. And that realization creates panic, because now they realize access was never a right. It was a privilege, and they lost it silently. They start to test the waters. Oh, like a message, a random comment, a question masked as small talk. But you don't bite. You don't punish either. You simply exist, without leaning in. And that restraint, that silent power, that's what breaks their grip. You've stopped feeding the cycle. You've exited the arena without a fight. And now they're left shouting into the void, trying to provoke something that no longer lives for their attention. You've walked away emotionally, without leaving physically. That's the difference between absence and presence without access. Absence is easy to process. Presence without permission, that's harder. Because they see you thriving, breathing, living, but not for them. That reality burns. And while they're spinning, trying to decode your silence, you've already moved into a new phase. One where you don't need to chase validation. One where your calm speaks louder than any reaction ever could. And they hear it, loud and clear. At first they watch from a distance, confident, silent, calm. They told themselves your silence was temporary, just a storm passing through. But then, time didn't bring your return, and your energy didn't shift back. That's when their curiosity turned into something else, quiet panic. They start checking your posts, your stories, your subtle signals, waiting for a song lyric, a vague quote, a photo with a hidden message, something, anything that says you still feel, that you still look back, that you still hurt. But there's nothing. No cryptic captions, No bitter memes. No emotional leftovers for them to feed on. Just freedom. A kind of peace they weren't prepared for. Our digital silence not meant to provoke, but to protect. You're not performing pain, you're just living on your own terms. And that shakes them more than any argument could, because they can't track your emotions anymore. There are no clues, no codes, no half messages to dissect. And the more they search, the more they realize. They've lost access not just to you, but to your inner world. You see, people don't panic when you're angry. They panic when they can't read you anymore, when your steps become unpredictable, when your energy feels unreachable, because emotional manipulators thrive on knowing your next move. But now you're off the radar. They scroll and scroll, looking for you in between the lines, hoping your silence is still about them. But nothing connects. Your life no longer centers around their absence. Your calm doesn't include their presence. That disconnect starts to echo in their mind. It begins with a subtle thought. Maybe they're just hiding it well. But it doesn't stop there. Days go by. Still no signs. Still no slips. No passive-aggressive posts. No reactive replies. And that's when the thought becomes a whisper. What if they've really moved on? That whisper grows louder. It crawls into their ego. What if I don't matter anymore? And once that question lands, it spreads like wildfire. Because up until now, they've always assumed your silence was emotional, not indifferent. Now they're not so sure. And it's not just what you're not saying. It's what you're doing instead. Living, posting with lightness, laughing in photos, sharing beauty without a trace of sadness. You don't look like someone trying to be okay. You look like someone who already is. That contrast hits hard. They expected a struggle, an obvious hole in your routine. But you're not limping, you're flying. And it's not a show, it's not a strategy. It's just what happens when peace finally replaces longing. The silence that once seemed passive now feels like distance. Not the kind that waits to be closed, the kind that can't be crossed. And that's the kind of distance that destroys the illusion of importance, slowly, quietly, completely. Now they start to wonder if all the power they once felt was just projection. If all the control they thought they had was borrowed. If maybe, just maybe, they were never the reason behind your silence, but the reason behind your healing. And that thought cuts deeper than any fight, because it doesn't just say, you're gone. It says, you've outgrown. It whispers that their role in your story may have ended, not with a scream, but with stillness. Not with a door slam, but with a step forward. And when someone who once felt central to your world realizes they're no longer even a footnote, it bruises the part of them they never let anyone see, their ego, their identity, their belief that they were irreplaceable, because they thought your silence was about pain. But now they're beginning to understand. Your silence was about release, and that revelation breaks something inside of them. Because they're not just witnessing your absence, they're witnessing your freedom. Pain used to live inside you. It sat with you during the sleepless nights. It walked beside you when you replayed old messages. It whispered in your ear every time silence answered your hope. But that pain slowly and quietly moved out. And now it has a new home. Because now they're the ones pacing, wondering, scanning every digital move you make, looking for signs of weakness, of attachment, of unfinished wounds. But what they see is emptiness, not in you, but in the space they used to occupy. You didn't explode. You didn't beg. You didn't block, scream, or send 1,000 final texts. You didn't try to prove your worth one last time. You simply stopped. Stopped explaining. Stopped reaching. Stopped giving access to someone who didn't know what to do with it. And that silence, so clean and unbothered, now echoes in them. At first, they thought it was just another one of your moods, a break, a silent protest. But time kept ticking, and your silence didn't change color. It didn't melt. It stayed. That's when they realized this wasn't a phase. This was a turning point, a shift they didn't see coming. Because for the first time, your silence didn't carry hope. It carried finality. And nothing is more terrifying to someone used to being forgiven. Now the roles have reversed. You're not the one waiting for closure, they are. You're not the one holding on, they are. one suffering in confusion, they are. And the silence, the same one they used to weaponize against you, is now slowly crushing them. Because silence is easy to ignore when it's full of emotion. But when silence turns neutral, emotionally cold, almost peaceful, it becomes unbearable. They can't scream at it. They can't argue with it. They can't fix it. They're left sitting with their own echo. They start to remember moments they brushed off. Things they said without care. Times you reached out and they pulled away. And those memories, once insignificant to them, now return with weight. Because now they understand that was the last time you tried. They're not haunted by what you said. They're haunted by everything you didn't. The conversations you stopped initiating, the effort you stopped making, the doors you closed without slamming, the calm that replaced your chaos. And while they sit in silence hoping you'll reach out again, deep down they know this is different. You're not punishing them. You've simply disconnected. And that realization starts to sting in places they didn't know existed. The panic sets in quietly. It's not loud or dramatic. It shows up in the way they check your profile and find nothing directed at them, in the way their messages remain unread, in the way your name disappears from their notifications and doesn't return. That's when they start to panic. Not because you left, but because you didn't try to come back. You didn't ask them to understand. You didn't make one last emotional plea. And that absence of noise, that's what cuts the deepest. They start reaching out, maybe not directly, maybe through subtle moves. A like, a shared post, a random message after weeks. But your response is no longer automatic. Your silence now has boundaries, and your peace has become untouchable. They're finally feeling the weight you carried, not because you wanted revenge, but because healing has side effects. One of them is clarity, and clarity makes space, space they no longer know how to fill. That's where the real pain begins, and the most devastating part for them, it's not the silence itself. It's the realization that this time you're not watching your phone. You're not checking if they care. You're not counting the hours since the last message. You've stopped waiting altogether. That's what breaks them, not your absence. Your indifference, not your distance, your peace. Because now the pain lives with them, quiet, heavy, permanent. And nothing they do seems to bring you back. There comes a moment when your silence becomes more than distance. It becomes a mirror. And the person who once dismissed you is now forced to look at what they've done. Not through confrontation, not through words, but through who you've become when they're no longer in control. You no longer beg. You no longer explain. You no longer show signs of emotional life tied to them. And everything they try to do now lands in a place that no longer reacts. The buttons they used to press are no longer wired to you. The game has ended, but they didn't get the memo. They send a message hoping for tension. They post something designed to spark jealousy. They create situations that used to pull you in, but what they find now is silence, stillness, indifference. Not forced, not performed, real. And that emptiness where reaction used to live, that drives them insane, because what they're seeing isn't anger, it's absence. Not of presence, but of participation. You're not punishing them. You've simply stepped out of the arena. You're no longer playing the role they gave you. You used to be the one who overthought, who watched every signal, who read between every line. But now, the only thing you're watching is your own peace. You're not ignoring them to provoke anything. You've just stopped looking in their direction. That's what disorients them, because they thought they had time. They thought you'd always stay emotionally available. They thought they could leave the door open and you'd keep standing in the hallway. But now the hallway is empty. And the door leads to no one. They start to see your new self, and it unsettles them. Not because you're angry, but because you're clear. You've become a reflection of everything they lost. And seeing you like that, strong, calm, distant, forces them to see their role in your transformation. You don't carry bitterness, you don't throw blame. But your silence says everything they don't want to hear. I'm not who I was, and I'm not coming back to that version of me. And for someone who once thrived on being the center of your world, that truth is unbearable. Now, when they try to re-enter, they find nothing familiar. The doors don't open the same way, the energy is different. The warmth is gone, not cold, just no longer available. What they once knew is no longer there, and the version of you that remains doesn't bend. They try to play the old game, subtle messages, guilt tactics, memories dangled like bait, but the rules have changed. And more than that, the player has left. There's no audience, no applause. No performance, just silence. That's what they can't handle. Because the stage used to be theirs, they used to set the tempo. But now, the stage is empty, the lights are off, and you're not sitting in the front row anymore, waiting for their next move. You've left the theater entirely, and with it, you've reclaimed your story. It's a strange kind of pain, the one that doesn't come from being left, but from realizing you're no longer needed. That's what they feel now, the quiet collapse of a power dynamic they didn't know they were depending on, one that no longer exists. And the most piercing part of it all, it's not what you've said, it's what you haven't. No dramatic closure, no explosive finale, just the gentle finality of a chapter that closed itself, a decision that didn't ask for permission, a peace that doesn't seek validation. You don't come back to prove a point. You don't return to show them what they lost, because real growth doesn't perform, it simply moves on. And when they look at you now, they don't see someone trying to win. They see someone who already won by no longer needing to play. Every attempt they make to pull you back now feels like a punch to their own pride. A reaction they once expected with confidence now hits nothing. Just air, just silence. Just the immovable presence of someone who no longer bends to their rhythm. That's what breaks them now. You've become calm, but not passive, present, but not available. Your stillness is no longer a waiting room. It's a boundary. Your silence doesn't scream for attention. It radiates peace. And peace, when someone's used to chaos, becomes terrifying. They send a message, even if it's just a single emoji. They like an old photo, hoping it triggers something. They try to provoke a response with half-meant words or nostalgic games, but nothing lands because the version of you that once chased no longer exists. Your energy now is a closed gate they can still see but can't walk through, and that hurts in ways they never admit, because they realize with each unanswered attempt that they lost access to the best part of you, not your presence, but your openness. You didn't become cold, you became precise, and with that precision came power. The power to observe without reacting, to exist without seeking, to stay without clinging. And that level of presence? It's the sentence they never saw coming. Now they wander through the same spaces where your attention used to flood them and find nothing but silence, not because you disappeared, but because you detached. You're there, but not for them. And that is a deeper rejection than words could ever deliver. They used to know how to reach you, what to say, when to say it. But now, every attempt is a swing in the dark. Every move they make is met with your stillness. You've become the consequence of every moment they thought you'd never walk away. And it wasn't rage that made you leave. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't need explanations or revenge. Just distance, just silence, just a life that no longer includes them at the center. And now they sit in front of your calm, like someone locked outside a door they never thought could close. A door that once opened every time they knocked, but this time the handle doesn't turn, the welcome mat is gone. And so are you, not in body, but in willingness. You're no longer hiding, you're shining. But your light doesn't warm them anymore. It simply exists, without invitation, without explanation. And that untouchable presence? That's the wound they now carry. Because nothing destroys someone's ego like realizing they no longer know how to get your attention. And nothing confuses them more than seeing you at peace, without needing anything from them, not even closure. They used to feel like the center of your gravity, but now your orbit has shifted. Your focus has expanded. Your silence is no longer a strategy, it's a state, one they can't break, can't reach, can't touch. And in that untouchable silence, they finally feel what they once ignored in you. Because the truth is brutal. Those who didn't know how to protect you now don't even know how to approach you. So now the question isn't whether they'll come back. It's whether you'll still be there if they do, and whether they'll even recognize who you've become, because the silence they once dismissed has transformed you. You no longer explain, you no longer perform, and you sure as hell don't chase anyone who couldn't see your worth the first time. But here's the part that matters most. Will you keep growing, or will you let their return drag you back into the same cycle? because they will return. Maybe not with words, maybe with a like, a glance, a small, "Hey, how are you?" But it's not about what they do, it's about what you do next. Are you strong enough now to stay calm and stay gone? If you felt that shift inside you, if this message lit something in your chest, don't let it fade. Make it your turning point. Use this silence not to wait, but to rebuild. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, you'll find powerful strategies to transform heartbreak into emotional power and silence into your greatest strength.